The humid air of Exelon 3 clung to Albert Holt's skin as he carefully navigated through the bioluminescent undergrowth. Each step released a soft humming sound, as if the forest itself was breathing. The translucent leaves overhead filtered the twin suns' light into a kaleidoscope of greens and purples, casting dancing shadows across his weathered face. His research vessel, camouflaged with adaptive panels that mimicked the surrounding vegetation, stood silently a kilometer behind him, nearly invisible among the massive tree trunks. Albert paused, consulting the holographic display on his wrist. The botanical scanner indicated he was close to a grove of phasmofungi, a potential breakthrough in his search for a cure to the neural thorn fever ravaging the outer colonies. 6 months of solitary exploration on this remote planet had yielded promising results, but nothing concrete enough to justify the Interstellar Medical Guild's investment. Just a little further, he muttered to himself, adjusting the oxygen mixture in his portable breather. The atmosphere of Exelon 3 was breathable, but heavy, with spores that could trigger allergic reactions in humans. As a botanical pharmacologist, Albert knew better than to take unnecessary risks, especially when working alone on an uncharted world. The forest around him pulsed with life. Luminous insects darted between alien flowers that opened and closed in rhythmic patterns. Vines with transparent sacs of glowing liquid wrapped around tree trunks, forming natural lanterns in the deepening shadows. Despite his scientific detachment, Albert couldn't help but feel a profound sense of wonder at the biological symphony surrounding him. His scanner beeped softly, indicating a strong concentration of the chemical markers he sought. Albert quickened his pace, carefully stepping over a patch of carnivorous moss that rippled at his proximity. The Phasmofungi Grove would be his most significant find yet, possibly containing the enzyme necessary to break down the protein chains of the neural thorn pathogen. A sound broke through the ambient hum of the forest, something distinctly non-botanical. Albert froze, his hand instinctively moving to the pulse pistol at his hip. The Guild regulations prohibited interference with sentient species, but Exelon 3 had been classified as uninhabited. The preliminary surveys had detected no signs of civilization or advanced life forms. The sound came again, a wet, gurgling moan that raised the hairs on the back of Albert's neck. It wasn't the call of any creature he'd documented in his months on the planet. It sounded desperate. Albert hesitated. His mission parameters were clear: collect botanical samples, analyze their medicinal properties, and avoid unnecessary contact with local fauna. But the sound carried with it an unmistakable note of distress that resonated with something deep within him. Before he could reconsider, his feet were already moving toward the source. He pushed through a curtain of phosphorescent vines, stepping into a small clearing bathed in the purple glow of overhead flowers. What he saw made him stop in his tracks. A figure knelt on the ground, cradling something in its arms. Even from a distance, Albert could tell it wasn't human. The being's skin had a deep violet hue, with bioluminescent patterns flowing beneath the surface like liquid starlight. Its form was vaguely humanoid but more slender, with elongated limbs that ended in graceful, six-fingered hands. A crown of crystalline structures rose from its head, catching and refracting the ambient light. It was what the alien held that seized Albert's attention. A smaller version of the being lay limp in its arms, its skin pallid and dull compared to the adult's vibrant coloring. The child, Albert instinctively recognized it as such, was barely moving, its chest rising and falling in shallow, irregular gasps. The adult alien's head snapped up at his approach, its eyes, large, multifaceted orbs of swirling silver, fixed on him with startling intensity. For a moment, Albert stood transfixed, his scientific mind racing to categorize this unprecedented encounter. Then, the alien spoke. Its voice, a melodic series of clicks and trills, that somehow coalesced into words he could understand, whether through some unknown technology or natural ability. He couldn't tell. Human, it said, the word filled with both fear and desperate hope. Fix my child and I'll give you any pleasure you want. The directness of the statement caught Albert off guard. He'd encountered many species during his guild service, but none had addressed him with such raw desperation. The alien's eyes never left his face as it clutched the child closer to its chest. I'm a doctor, Albert said carefully, slowly lowering his hands to show he meant no harm. A healer. Can you tell me what happened? The alien's crystalline crown flickered with pulses of light. No time, it hissed. She dies. Each breath weaker. You have medicines. You have knowledge. Its voice rose in pitch. Save her, please. Albert approached cautiously, medical training overriding his hesitation. The child's condition was visibly deteriorating, the bioluminescent patterns beneath its skin flickering erratically, like a failing power source. I need to examine her, he said, kneeling beside the pair. My name is Albert Holt. I'm a botanical pharmacologist with the Interstellar Medical Guild. The adult alien's crystalline crown vibrated, producing a series of melodic tones. Serial, she said, indicating herself. This is Erin. She held out the child with trembling arms. Albert gently took the small alien, immediately noting the burning heat of her skin. His medical scanner wouldn't be calibrated for this species' physiology, but it might provide some basic readings. He passed the device over the child's body, frowning at the results. Respiratory distress, elevated body temperature, abnormal neural patterns, he murmured, more to himself than to Serial. Some kind of infection or toxic exposure, perhaps. Serial made a keening sound. The breath-stealing spores, we know them, ancient enemy of our kind, but never so strong, so quick. Her silver eyes seemed to shimmer with what Albert recognized as tears, though they appeared more like liquid mercury. Traditional remedies fail. She needs human medicine. Albert's mind raced. Neural thorn fever presented similarly in humans. Respiratory distress, hyperthermia, seizures, but he couldn't assume the pathology would be identical in an alien species. Still, his research vessel contained a well-equipped medical bay. It offered better odds than treating the child here in the forest. I have a ship nearby, he said, already rising to his feet with Erin cradled carefully in his arms. Medical equipment, oxygen, broad-spectrum antibiotics. I can't promise anything, but it's her best chance. Serial stood in a single fluid motion, her height surprising Albert. She towered over him by at least a foot. Lead, she said simply. I follow. They moved through the forest at a pace that balanced urgency with care. Albert noted how Serial navigated the terrain with preternatural grace, occasionally reaching out to brush certain plants aside before he even realized they posed a danger. Despite the gravity of the situation, the scientist in him couldn't help but marvel at this first contact scenario unfolding in real time. Your species, he ventured as they hurried along a natural path. Do you have a name for yourselves? Velor, Serial replied without breaking stride. We are the Velor of Exelon. Few remain. Fewer still who remember the old ways. She gestured at the forest around them. This world speaks. We listen. But some voices have been forgotten. Erin shuddered in Albert's arms, a soft moan escaping her lips. The bioluminescent patterns beneath her skin dimmed momentarily before flaring bright again, a concerning fluctuation. We're almost there, Albert assured them both, picking up the pace. When they reached the clearing where his research vessel stood, Serial halted abruptly. Her crystalline crown stiffened, and the patterns beneath her skin pulsed rapidly. Sky vessel, she whispered, a note of awe in her voice. The metal seed that travels between stars. Albert had no time to ponder the implications of her recognition. "Yes, it's my ship. There's medical equipment inside." He pressed his palm against the biometric scanner beside the airlock. With a pneumatic hiss, the door slid open, revealing the sterile interior. Serial hesitated only briefly before following him inside, her tall frame having to duck beneath the human-proportioned doorway. Her eyes darted around the cabin, taking in the array of technology with what appeared to be both familiarity and caution. Albert moved quickly to the medical bay, a compact but well-equipped section of his research vessel. He placed Aaron on the examination table, immediately activating the life support systems. An oxygen mask designed for humanoid physiology might not be perfect for Valorian anatomy, but it was better than nothing. "Computer, establish baseline readings and analyze for unknown pathogens," he commanded as he attached monitoring sensors to Aaron's small body. The medical AI hummed to life, holographic displays materializing above the table. Serial watched every movement with intense focus. "What is it doing?" she asked, one six-fingered hand hovering protectively near her child. "Gathering information," Albert explained, studying the emerging data, trying to understand what's making Aaron sick. The displays showed chaotic patterns, vital signs that fluctuated wildly outside human norms. But without a Valorian baseline for comparison, Albert couldn't determine which readings indicated danger and which might be normal for her species. "Computer, cross-reference with all known xenobiological databases," he ordered. "Priority on respiratory pathogens and neural toxins." "Processing," the AI responded in its neutral voice. "No exact matches found. Closest analog, Mycosporum neurotoxis, encountered on Titan Colony, 2187. Albert's brow furrowed. "A fungal infection? That would align with respiratory symptoms." He turned to Serial. "You mentioned breath-stealing spores. Can you describe them? Where might she have encountered them?" Serial's crystalline crown vibrated in what Albert was beginning to recognize as distress. "Sacred caves, 3 days' journey from here. Aaron followed me during gathering ritual. Disturbed the sleeping death. Tiny particles that float in air, invisible until too late." Her fingers traced patterns on Aaron's arm. "They enter through breath, travel to mind lights, dim them slowly." "Mind lights," Albert repeated, glancing at the neural activity displayed on the monitor. The bioluminescent patterns beneath Aaron's skin seemed to correlate with brain function, a biological indicator of neural activity. Fascinating from a scientific perspective. But right now, his focus needed to be on treatment. "I'll administer an emergency oxygen treatment and a broad-spectrum antifungal," he decided, preparing the medications. "It's designed for human physiology, but modified for xenobiological compatibility." As he worked, Albert noticed Serial producing a small pouch from within the folds of her clothing. She removed a handful of what appeared to be crushed leaves with a distinctive red-veined pattern. "Ancient remedy," she explained, catching his questioning look. "Not strong enough alone, but perhaps with your medicines." Albert hesitated. Combining unknown alien botanicals with his medications could be dangerous. But Serial likely possessed knowledge of her own species' physiology that far exceeded his emergency xenomedicine training. "What does it do?" he asked, scanner already analyzing the composition of the leaves. "Strengthens mind lights. Helps body fight invaders." She crushed the leaves further between her palms, releasing a sweet, mentholated aroma. "For generations, this saved our children. Now spores grow stronger. Need more." The scanner completed its analysis, displaying a complex molecular structure unlike anything in Albert's databases. Yet, certain compounds showed similarities to neuroprotective agents used in human medicine. "We'll try both," he decided. "My treatments to attack the infection, yours to support Aaron's system." Together, they worked in a careful choreography, Albert administering the modified antifungal through a mist that Aaron could inhale, while Serial prepared a poultice of the red-veined leaves to place on specific points of her daughter's body where the bioluminescence was strongest. Hours passed in tense vigilance. Aaron's condition stabilized, but didn't improve significantly. The fungal infection had taken hold too deeply in her system for the emergency treatments alone. "She needs more specialized care," Albert finally admitted, rubbing his tired eyes. "The medications I have aren't specific enough for this pathogen, and without complete knowledge of Valorian physiology, I'm working partially blind." Serial hadn't moved from her daughter's side. Her own bioluminescence dimmed with exhaustion. "What do we do?" Albert studied the data his ship had collected. The computers identified the fungal strain as similar to one I've encountered before, but with significant differences. It's producing a neurotoxin that's attacking Aaron's neural pathways, or mind lights, as you call them. He pulled up a holographic map of the sector. "There's a medical outpost on Carrion Theta, a moon orbiting the gas giant Veltana. 3 days' journey at my ship's maximum speed. They have more advanced equipment. Xenobiologists with broader experience." Serial's silver eyes fixed on him, with that unsettling intensity. "Will they help non-humans?" The question carried layers of meaning that Albert couldn't fully unpack. Had the Velor encountered humans before? What had those encounters been like? "Yes," he assured her. "The Medical Guild treats all sentient beings. It's our foundational principle." She seemed to consider this, her crystalline crown emitting a soft, thoughtful hum. 3 days may be too long. Aaron grows weaker. Serial straightens suddenly. "I know another way. Faster. More certain." She produced another item from within her garments. What appeared to be a piece of ancient parchment. Its surface covered in intricate, glowing patterns that shifted subtly as Albert watched. "Map to sacred healing grounds," Serial explained. "Where oldest medicines grow, plants that fight the breath stealers. Combined with your science, perhaps enough to save her." Albert studied the map with professional interest. It depicted a region of Exelon 3 he hadn't explored yet, a series of valleys and plateaus several hundred kilometers to the east of their current position. "These plants," he said, "what do they do exactly?" "Strengthen mind lights, purify breath, drive out invaders." Serial's fingers traced the map lovingly. "Ancestors used them to survive great sickness epochs. Knowledge passed through generations." Albert weighed their options. The journey to Carrion Theta was safer but slower. Hunting for specific botanicals based on an alien map was risky, but could provide a more immediate solution. As a guild doctor, his primary directive was to preserve life, using the most effective means available. "If we find these plants," he asked, "do you know how to prepare them for treatment?" Serial's crown glowed with certainty. "Yes, ancient knowledge lives in me." "Then we'll try both approaches." Albert decided. "We'll set course for Carrion Theta, but stop to gather these medicines on the way. My ship can reach the healing grounds in hours, rather than days on foot." Relief visibly washed through Serial's body, the bioluminescent patterns flowing more vibrantly beneath her skin. "Thank you, human healer." "Albert," he reminded her gently, "and you don't need to thank me. Helping is what I do." With a course plotted and Aaron stabilized for transport, Albert prepared his ship for departure. The vessel was designed primarily for research rather than passenger transport, but the small crew quarters could accommodate Serial, while Aaron remained in the medical bay under constant monitoring. As the engines hummed to life, Albert couldn't help but reflect on how dramatically his solitary research mission had changed in a matter of hours. First contact with an intelligent species, an emergency medical situation, and now a race against time to save a child's life. The Guild would have protocols for such scenarios, but they seemed inadequate for the reality he now faced. The ship rose smoothly through Exelon 3's atmosphere, the bioluminescent forest shrinking beneath them. Through the viewport, Albert watched Serial's reaction as her world grew smaller, wondering if this was her first experience of spaceflight. Her expression remained unreadable, but her crystalline crown vibrated in a pattern he hadn't observed before. "You've seen ships like mine before," he ventured, making it half statement, half question. Serial's gaze remained fixed on the receding planet. "Long ago, others came. Metal seeds like yours, but larger. They took much, gave little." Her voice carried no accusation, only a statement of fact. Velor hid deeper in forests, in caves, became fewer. The implication was clear. Previous human contact had not been positive for her people. Albert felt a pang of guilt by association, though he'd had no part in whatever exploitation had occurred. "I'm sorry," he said simply. "Not all humans are the same." Serial turned to face him, silver eyes seeming to look through rather than at him. "No, not all Velor same either. Some help strangers, some harm." Her gaze softened as she looked toward the medical bay where Aaron lay. "You help. That is what matters now." The ship's navigation system indicated they were approaching the coordinates from Serial's map. Albert guided the vessel lower, scanning for a suitable landing site near the healing grounds. The landscape below was dramatically different from the forest where they'd met. Massive crystalline formations jutted from the ground like the bones of some ancient, enormous creature. Between them, patches of vegetation glowed with intense colors, blues, purples, and reds so vivid they seemed almost artificial. "There," Serial said, pointing to a plateau surrounded by a ring of luminous red plants. "Sacred Circle, Heart of Healing." Albert brought the ship down carefully on a flat area just outside the ring. Environmental scans showed the atmosphere was safe, though rich with unusual compounds that made his botanical scanner chime with excitement. Whatever grew here, it was chemically complex and potentially valuable. "I'll need to bring collection equipment," Albert said, preparing for the expedition. "Can you identify which plants we need?" Serial nodded, her attention already focused on the landscape outside. 7 types, each for different purpose. Together, they form complete medicine. They disembarked, Albert carrying a portable life support unit connected to Aaron. The child's condition had neither improved nor worsened, a holding pattern that couldn't last indefinitely. The moment they stepped onto the plateau, Albert felt a subtle vibration through the soles of his boots. The entire area seemed to hum with the same rhythmic pulse he'd noticed in the forest, but stronger, more coordinated. It was as if the land itself acknowledged their presence. Serial moved with newfound purpose, her tall form gliding between crystalline structures with the confidence of someone returning to a familiar sanctuary. She knelt beside a cluster of plants with spiral-shaped leaves that emitted a soft blue glow. "First medicine," she announced, carefully harvesting several leaves and placing them in a container Albert provided. "Opens breath pathways." They continued this process across the plateau, Serial identifying each plant and explaining its purpose, while Albert documented everything with scientific precision. His scanner worked overtime, analyzing the complex biochemistry of each specimen. "This is remarkable," he commented as they collected the 4th plant variety, a moss-like growth with red filaments that writhed gently when touched. "The molecular structures are unlike anything in our pharmacological databases, but I can already see potential applications. This one contains compounds similar to neural regeneratives we use for trauma patients." Serial nodded without surprise. "Ancestors said Exelon plants hold answers to all sicknesses. Humans once knew this, came to learn, then to take." There it was again, that hint of historical contact and subsequent exploitation. Albert wanted to ask more, but focused on their immediate task instead. The 7th and final plant proved the most difficult to locate, growing only in the shadows cast by the tallest crystal formations. Most potent, Serial explained, as she carefully extracted the luminous root system. Binds other medicines, directs them to mind lights. With all 7 plant varieties collected, they returned to the ship. Albert's scientific excitement was tempered by urgency. Erin's latest readings showed her neural patterns becoming increasingly erratic. "How do we prepare these?" he asked as they entered the lab section of his vessel. Serial laid out the plants in a specific pattern. Some crushed, some heated, some mixed with water. Process passed through generations. She looked up at Albert. "But your tools may make better medicine. Stronger." Albert understood what she was suggesting. A combination of traditional Valorian herbal knowledge with human medical technology. It was exactly the kind of collaborative approach the Guild supposedly valued, though rarely practiced in reality. "We'll work together," he decided. "Show me your methods, and I'll see how we can enhance them." What followed was an intensive crash course in Valorian pharmacology. Serial demonstrated techniques passed down through countless generations, precise, crushing methods, specific mixing sequences, carefully timed heating processes. Albert documented everything while offering suggestions for refinement using his equipment. Hours passed as they worked side by side. Despite the language barrier and vast cultural differences, Albert found a rhythm with Serial. Her knowledge of the plants was intuitive and profound, while his scientific approach helped quantify and standardize the process. The result was a luminous blue liquid that seemed to move with a life of its own inside its container. Under the microscope, Albert could see complex molecular structures binding and reforming in patterns that defied conventional biochemistry. "The final medicine," Serial said with reverence, holding the container up to the light. "Now, we must administer it." Albert hesitated. "I should test it first. Make sure it's—" "No time," Serial interrupted, her crown vibrating anxiously. "Erin's mind lights fade. Trust ancient knowledge. Trust what we created together." Looking at the medical monitors, Albert couldn't argue. Erin's condition was deteriorating rapidly. The bioluminescent patterns beneath her skin were dimming, and her breathing had become shallow and irregular. "Okay," he agreed. "But we'll start with a small dose and monitor her reaction carefully." They moved to the medical bay where Erin lay unconscious. Following Serial's instructions, Albert prepared a nebulizer to administer the medicine as a fine mist that the child could inhale. Another portion would be applied directly to specific points on her body where the bioluminescence was strongest. "These are connection points between body and mind lights," Serial explained, as she dabbed the glowing liquid onto her daughter's skin. "Pathways for healing to travel." Albert monitored the medical readings closely as the treatment began. For several tense minutes, there was no change. Then, almost imperceptibly, the pattern of Erin's neural activity began to shift. The chaotic spikes on the display gradually became more regular, more coordinated. "It's working," Albert breathed, hardly daring to believe it. "Her neural patterns are stabilizing." Serial made a sound that might have been a sob of relief. "Mind light strengthen, but battle not won yet. Need continued treatment." They maintained the regimen, administering the medicine at regular intervals as the ship continued its journey toward Carrion Theta. Albert used the time to analyze the compound further, fascinated by its properties. This could revolutionize treatment for neural pathologies across known space, he told Serial as they watched Erin's steady improvement. "The way these molecules target specific neural pathways without affecting surrounding tissue, it's beyond our current capabilities." Serial's expression remained solemn. "Knowledge not given to be owned, human Albert, given to save lives." Albert nodded, chastened by the gentle rebuke. "Of course, I'm sorry, it's just, as a doctor, I see the potential to help so many." "Helping is good," Serial agreed. "Taking without asking is not." The conversation was interrupted by an urgent beeping from the ship's navigation system. Albert moved quickly to the cockpit, checking the displays with growing concern. "We have a problem," he called back to Serial. "Long-range sensors are picking up another vessel intercepting our course. Configuration matches known patterns for Veltanan raiders." Serial joined him, her tall frame having to bend slightly in the human-sized cockpit. "Raiders. Pirates," Albert explained grimly. "They patrol the outer reaches of the Veltana system, preying on smaller vessels like mine. Research ships are prime targets. Valuable equipment, medical supplies." The display showed the approaching ship closing distance rapidly. It was larger than Albert's vessel, and undoubtedly better armed. Standard Guild protocol recommended immediate surrender to preserve life. But with Aaron's condition still precarious, delay could be fatal. "Options?" Serial asked, her voice calm despite the danger. Albert studied the navigational chart. "We're approaching the Veltanan magnetic belt, a region of intense electromagnetic activity. Dangerous to navigate, but the disruption might mask our signature and allow us to lose them." "You can pilot through this belt?" "Theoretically," Albert admitted. "I've studied the patterns, but never attempted it personally." He looked at her directly. "It's risky." Serial's silver eyes held his gaze steadily. "Life is risk. Aaron needs Carrion Theta's medicines to fully recover. Choose path." Decision made. Albert adjusted their course toward the shimmering band of energy visible in the distance. The raider vessel followed, closing the gap with alarming speed. "They've detected our course change," Albert noted, watching the tactical display. "They know what we're attempting." The first warning shot flashed past their starboard side, a deliberate miss designed to encourage surrender. "Hold on," Albert warned, engaging the engines to maximum thrust. The research vessel shuddered under the strain as they plunged toward the magnetic belt. The view outside transformed as they entered the belt, streaks of ionized particles creating a kaleidoscope of color that would have been beautiful under different circumstances. The ship's systems immediately began to falter, displays flickering as the magnetic interference disrupted electronic components. Behind them, the raider vessel hesitated at the edge of the belt before following them in, its superior shielding providing better protection against the electromagnetic chaos. "They're still pursuing," Albert said through gritted teeth, fighting the controls as the ship bucked and shuddered. "But the interference is affecting their targeting systems." Another shot fired from the raider vessel went wide, the energy beam dissipating harmlessly in the charged particles surrounding them. Albert used the momentary advantage to dive deeper into the belt, where the interference was strongest. Warning indicators flashed across the control panel. Primary navigation was failing. Life support systems switching to emergency backup. In the medical bay, Aaron's monitors would be offline, leaving her condition unknown. "We can't stay in here long," Albert warned. The ship wasn't designed for this kind of stress. Serial stood perfectly still beside him, seemingly unaffected by the violent motion of the vessel. "There," she said suddenly, pointing to a particularly dense cluster of energy patterns ahead. "Hide there." It wasn't standard procedure, but Albert had few options. He directed the ship toward the energy cluster, trusting Serial's intuition. As they entered the swirling mass of charged particles, the interference reached levels that rendered most systems completely inoperable. Through the viewport, they could barely make out the raider vessel circling the perimeter of the cluster, unwilling to follow them into what their sensors would identify as a suicidal position. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours as they drifted in the electromagnetic storm, systems failing one by one. The temperature in the cabin rose as cooling systems faltered. Breathing became labored as air recyclers struggled. "We need to leave soon," Albert said, voice rough from the increasingly toxic air. "But they're still out there, waiting." Serial's bioluminescent patterns had dimmed to conserve energy, but her voice remained strong. "I have idea. Your vessel has smaller craft? Escape pod?" Albert nodded. "One emergency pod, barely room for two. Send empty, different direction, distraction." It was a desperate plan, but they had few alternatives. Albert programmed the escape pod for a rapid launch on a trajectory away from Carrion Theta, then initiated the sequence. The small pod detached with a jolt that rocked the main vessel. Through the flickering viewport, they watched the tiny craft speed away from the energy cluster. Almost immediately, the raider vessel moved to intercept it, believing they were attempting to escape. "Now," Albert said, restarting the main engines and plotting a course out of the energy cluster in the opposite direction. The ship responded sluggishly, systems coming back online with agonizing slowness. They emerged from the magnetic belt just as the raider vessel realized their deception. But by then, Albert had pushed the engines beyond safety limits, accelerating toward Carrion Theta with every ounce of power the damaged ship could muster. "They're not pursuing," he announced, checking the long-range sensors as they sputtered back to life. "Probably too damaged from the magnetic belt to risk another chase." Serial made a sound that might have been laughter. "Clever plan, human Albert." "Your plan," he corrected her, finally allowing himself to relax slightly. "I wouldn't have thought of using the escape pod as a decoy." "Together thinking," she said. "Better than alone." Albert couldn't argue with that. He initiated damage control protocols, then hurried back to the medical bay to check on Erin. The child's monitoring systems were gradually coming back online, showing that despite the disruption, her condition remained stable. The medicine protected her through the magnetic storm, Albert observed with relief. Remarkable resilience. Serial gently stroked her daughter's forehead. "Velour children strong, like plants of Exelon, bend in storm, not break." With the raiders left behind, their journey to Carrion Theta continued without further incident. The medical outpost came into view as a gleaming structure built into the surface of the small moon, its landing pads illuminated with guidance lights. Albert transmitted his guild identification and a brief explanation of their emergency. The response was immediate. Medical personnel standing by, equipment prepared for their arrival. As they docked, Albert turned to Serial. "The staff here aren't accustomed to treating Valorians. They'll have questions." Serial nodded her understanding. "I answer what I can. Trust your guild friends as you ask me to trust." The medical team that greeted them was professionally efficient, quickly transferring Erin to their more advanced facilities. Their initial surprise at encountering an unknown species was quickly subsumed by medical curiosity and duty. Dr. Elena Khoury, the station's chief xenobiologist, examined Erin while Albert provided a detailed account of the treatments they'd administered. "Fascinating," she commented, studying the remaining sample of the medicine they'd created. "You say this was formulated using traditional Valorian knowledge combined with guild methodology?" "Yes," Albert confirmed. Serial provided the botanical expertise and traditional preparation techniques. I contributed analytical tools and delivery systems. Dr. Khoury's eyes gleamed with scientific interest. "The molecular structure is unlike anything in our databases. The way it targets neural pathways while simultaneously attacking the fungal infection, it's years beyond current xenopharmacology." Albert glanced at Serial, who observed the proceedings with watchful silver eyes. "It's not my discovery to share or take credit for," he said carefully. "The knowledge belongs to the Velour." Dr. Khoury seemed to understand the implied boundary. "Of course. Our priority is treating the patient. The rest can be discussed later, with proper protocols for knowledge exchange." The station's advanced medical technology allowed for a more precise application of the treatment they'd developed. Within hours, Erin's condition showed marked improvement. The bioluminescent patterns beneath her skin strengthened, flowing in more regular, vibrant patterns. While the medical team worked, Albert took the opportunity to explore the station's database, searching for any previous records of Velour encounters. What he found troubled him deeply. "There was an expedition to Exelon 3 nearly 50 years ago," he told Serial as they sat in the observation deck, watching the gas giant Veltana slowly rotate below them. A Guild-sanctioned research mission that reported the planet as uninhabited, suitable for resource extraction. Serial's crystalline crown vibrated in a pattern Albert had come to recognize as sadness. They did not find us because we did not wish to be found. After first visitors took much, elders decided humans were dangerous. We retreated to deepest forests, ancient caves. But they must have seen signs of habitation, Albert pressed. Structures, cultivation. Velor live within world, not upon it. Serial explained. Our dwellings grow from living plants, return to soil when abandoned. We take only what renews. Her silver eyes fixed on him. Some humans saw, chose not to report. The implication was clear. The expedition had deliberately classified Exelon 3 as uninhabited to facilitate exploitation. It was a violation of the Guild's most fundamental principles. Yet apparently, not without precedent. I'll file a corrected report, Albert promised. Exelon 3 will be reclassified as inhabited by an intelligent species with established territorial rights. Serial regarded him thoughtfully. Words on distant records mean little. Actions here, now, mean much. Before Albert could respond, Dr. Curry approached with a smile that conveyed good news. Erin is awake and asking for her mother, she announced. The infection is in full retreat. Her neural patterns have stabilized and show no signs of permanent damage. The medical bay where Erin rested was kept dimly lit to accommodate Valorian light sensitivity. The child sat propped up on the examination table, her previously dull skin now glowing with renewed vitality. When she saw Serial, she made a melodic trilling sound that needed no translation, pure joy at reunion. Serial rushed to embrace her daughter, their bioluminescent patterns synchronizing in what Albert recognized as an intimate form of communication. He stood back, giving them privacy while still marveling at the beauty of their interaction. After a moment, Serial beckoned him closer. Erin wishes to thank the human healer who saved her life. Albert approached, smiling gently. Hello, Erin. I'm glad you're feeling better. The child studied him, with silver eyes that held the same intensity as her mother's, but with an added curiosity that only youth could bring. She extended a six-fingered hand toward him, the bioluminescent patterns flowing down her arm in deliberate sequences. She offers you light bond, Serial explained. Great honor among Velor, sharing of mind patterns. Hesitantly, Albert took the small hand in his. Immediately, a warm sensation spread up his arm, accompanied by a series of vivid impressions, colors he'd never seen before, sounds beyond human hearing range, emotions that had no names in any language he knew. It lasted only seconds but left him breathless with wonder. Thank you, he said to Erin when the connection faded, knowing the words were inadequate for what he'd just experienced. The child made a chirping sound that somehow conveyed both amusement and affection. Serial translated. She says your mind lights are strong, but swim in strange patterns, like fish in wrong pond. Albert laughed. That's probably an accurate assessment. Dr. Curry, who had been observing from a respectful distance, approached with a datapad. Erin will need to remain under observation for at least another day, but all indicators suggest a full recovery. The treatment you developed appears to have completely neutralized the fungal infection. And after observation period ends? Serial asked. You'll be free to return to Exelon 3, Dr. Curry assured her. I've already spoken with station administration about arranging transport. Serial's gaze turned to Albert. Will you return us home, human Albert? The question carried weight beyond the simple request for transportation. Albert thought of his research mission, the samples he'd collected, the reports he needed to file. But he also thought of the knowledge he'd gained through this unexpected encounter, knowledge that far exceeded anything he might have discovered on his own. Yes, he said. My ship should be repaired by then. I'll take you home. The day of observation passed quickly. Erin's recovery continued at a remarkable pace, her natural resilience amplified by the combined treatment. Dr. Curie took extensive notes on her progress, with Serial's permission, hoping to better understand Valorian physiology for future medical encounters. Albert used the time to oversee repairs to his research vessel and organize his botanical samples. The phasma fungi he'd originally sought seemed almost trivial now compared to the medicinal plants they'd harvested from the sacred healing grounds. As he worked, Albert found himself constantly distracted by thoughts of what would happen after he returned Serial and Erin to Exelon 3. His research mission had months remaining, but the discovery of an intelligent species should, by guild protocols, trigger an immediate return to headquarters for debriefing. Yet he was reluctant to leave Exelon so soon, now that he'd glimpsed the depth of knowledge the Velor possessed. When the time came to depart, Dr. Curie presented them with additional medical supplies, calibrated for Valorian physiology. "Just in case," she said. "And I've included documentation on how to contact the station directly if you need assistance in the future." Serial accepted the supplies with a formal gesture that involved touching her crystalline crown in a specific pattern. "Valor remember kindness," she said, "and knowledge freely shared." The journey back to Exelon 3 was markedly different from their desperate flight to Carrion Theta. Erin, fully recovered, explored the small research vessel with boundless curiosity, asking endless questions about human technology that Albert did his best to answer. Serial was more reserved, but Albert often caught her watching him with an expression he couldn't quite interpret. There seemed to be something she wanted to say, but held back. As they approached Exelon 3, its bioluminescent forests visible from orbit as patches of glowing color against the darker terrain, Erin pressed her face to the viewport in excitement. "Home," she trilled, the translator Albert had acquired on Carrion Theta, rendering her Valorian speech into English. "Mother, can Albert see our dwelling? Show him the singing pools?" Serial placed a gentle hand on her daughter's shoulder. "If Albert wishes," she said, her silver eyes finding his. "Human, would you visit Valor home before departing?" The invitation carried significance beyond mere hospitality. Albert sensed. "I'd be honored," he replied, genuinely curious about how the Velor lived. He brought the ship down in the same clearing where his journey with Serial had begun, what felt like a lifetime ago. The forest welcomed them with its familiar humming rhythm, the bioluminescent plants seeming to pulse more vibrantly at their arrival. Erin bounded down the ramp as soon as it lowered, clearly overjoyed to be back in her native environment. Serial followed more sedately, waiting for Albert at the bottom of the ramp. "Follow," she said simply, and led him into the forest. They traveled along paths invisible to Albert's eyes, but apparently clear to the Velor. Erin darted ahead, occasionally returning to show him some fascinating plant or tiny luminous creature. Serial moved with deliberate grace, occasionally touching certain plants in passing, which responded by glowing more intensely or changing color. After about an hour's journey, the forest opened into a secluded valley where crystalline formations, similar to those at the healing grounds, jutted from the earth. Between them, what appeared to be structures grew organically from the surrounding vegetation, living architecture that blended seamlessly with the natural environment. "Velor settlement," Serial announced, one of few remaining. As they approached, other Velor emerged from the living structures, perhaps 20 individuals of varying heights and ages, their bioluminescent patterns creating a spectacular light show as they communicated among themselves. All bore the distinctive crystalline crowns, though each was unique in shape and configuration. Erin ran ahead, presumably sharing news of their arrival. The gathered Velor's reaction to seeing a human was mixed. Some retreated slightly, while others moved forward with evident curiosity. An elder Velor, distinguished by an elaborate crystalline crown and deeply etched luminous patterns, approached them. He studied Albert with ancient silver eyes, before turning to Cyril, with a series of musical tones. "Elder Terax welcomes you," Cyril translated. "Says any who saves Velor child is friend to all Velor." Albert bowed respectfully. "Thank you for your welcome. Your world is beautiful beyond description." The elder made a gesture that caused his bioluminescent patterns to form complex, spiraling designs. Cyril watched with evident surprise before translating. "He offers you dwelling rights," she said, her voice carrying a note of awe. "Permission to stay among Velor, to learn and teach." Albert blinked in surprise. "That's very generous. But my guild assignment—" "Need not end," Cyril interjected. "Can continue work from here. Study plants with Velor guidance. Learn what no human knows." She hesitated before adding, "If you wish." The offer was unprecedented. Access to Velorian botanical knowledge could advance human medicine by decades, perhaps centuries. Yet Albert was acutely aware of the history of exploitation that had driven the Velor into hiding. "I would never take knowledge without permission," he said carefully, "or use it in ways that harm your people." Cyril conveyed his words to the elder, who responded with a series of low, resonant tones. The gathered Velor hummed in what seemed like approval. "Elder says knowledge is like forest, grows by sharing, dies in isolation," Cyril translated. "Velor have kept secrets too long, become fewer, weaker. Time for new growth." Aaron, who had been listening to the exchange, suddenly darted forward to take Albert's hand. "Stay," she said, the simple word carrying genuine emotion even through the translator. "Teach me about stars. I teach you about plants." Looking down at the child whose life he'd helped save. Then at Cyril, whose knowledge had made that possible. Albert felt something shift within him. The guild would expect a report. Protocols would need to be established for official contact. But those were details to be worked out. "I would be honored to stay," he said, "and learn from your people." The next few days were a whirlwind of new experiences, as Albert was integrated into the Velor settlement. He was provided with a living dwelling, a structure that grew from a specific arrangement of seeds and spores, guided by Velorian biomanipulation techniques. Within days, it had formed into a comfortable space that adapted to his physiological needs while maintaining the organic aesthetic of Velor architecture. Elder Terax assigned several knowledge keepers to work with Albert, sharing information about Exelon's botanical treasures while learning about human medicine in return. The exchange was cautious at first, centuries of mistrust not easily overcome. But Aaron's miraculous recovery served as a powerful testament to what cooperation could achieve. Cyril acted as his primary guide and translator. Though Albert was making progress, learning the basics of the Velorian language, a complex system of sounds, light patterns, and crystalline vibrations. Their days fell into a comfortable rhythm of research, exploration, and cultural exchange. In the evenings, Albert would often find himself seated beside the singing pools, natural formations where mineral-rich water resonated with the crystalline structures to create haunting melodies. It was during one such evening, as the twin suns of Exelon set in a spectacular display of color, that Cyril finally broached the subject that seemed to have been on her mind since their return. "Human Albert," she began, settling beside him at the pool's edge. "You remember first words I spoke to you?" Albert nodded, recalling the desperate plea in the forest. "You asked me to fix your child, and offered—" He hesitated, unsure how to delicately reference the rather direct proposition. "Any pleasure you want," Cyril completed for him, her silver eyes reflecting the last rays of sunlight. "Velor custom. Life debt must be balanced." "No balance needed," Albert assured her quickly. Helping Aaron was its own reward. Cyril's crystalline crown vibrated in a pattern he'd come to recognize as gentle amusement. "Humans complicated. Say one thing, feel another." Her bioluminescent patterns shifted to a deeper hue. I watch you, Albert. See loneliness. See how you look at stars with sadness. The observation was uncomfortably perceptive. Albert had built his career around solitary research missions, telling himself he preferred the isolation of deep space and uncharted worlds. But these weeks among the communal Velor had awakened an awareness of what he'd been missing. My work has always been solitary, he admitted. It's easier that way. Fewer complications. Easier? Yes. Better. No. Cyriel's six-fingered hand moved to rest lightly on his, a significant gesture, as the Velor were generally reserved with physical contact. Life debt remains, but perhaps balance found in new way. Albert looked at her questioningly. In the fading light, Cyriel's features seemed both alien and somehow familiar, her bioluminescence creating patterns of extraordinary beauty across her violet skin. I offer not pleasure of moment, she continued, her voice taking on a musical quality that the translator couldn't fully capture. Offer companionship of days, sharing of knowledge, of discovery. She paused, silver eyes searching his face. Of life, if human Albert wishes. The proposition took him by surprise, though perhaps it shouldn't have. They had formed a bond through Aaron's treatment, discovered a shared passion for knowledge and healing, and there had been moments, small gestures, lingering glances, that transcended the cultural barriers between them. Cyriel, he said carefully, are you suggesting? Partnership, she confirmed. Human term might be marriage, though not same. Velor bond through shared mindlights, shared purpose. Her crystalline crown shimmered with what might have been nervousness. If unwelcome suggestion, no offense taken. Life debt remains, finds other path. Albert considered her words thoughtfully. Guild regulations regarding relationships with non-human species were vague, primarily because such situations were considered extremely rare. There would be complications, certainly, questions of biology, culture, future. Yet as he looked at Cyriel, illuminated by her own inner light against the gathering darkness, those concerns seemed secondary to the connection they'd already formed. It's not unwelcome, he said finally, but I would need to understand more about what such a partnership means to the Velor. And you should know more about human expectations too. Cyriel's bioluminescence brightened visibly. Understanding grows with time, like forest after rain. Her hand remained on his, warm and somehow right, despite the difference in their number of fingers. Begin journey. See where path leads. I'd like that, Albert agreed, feeling something long dormant within him, stirring to life. Their conversation was interrupted by Aaron's arrival, the child practically bouncing with excitement as she approached. Elder Terex says celebration tomorrow, she announced, for human Albert's dwelling completion and new medicine discovery. Cyriel's crown vibrated with what Albert had learned, was her equivalent of a smile. Good timing, she said, exchanging a meaningful glance with Albert. Perhaps celebration for new beginnings also. The following day brought the entire Velor settlement together in the central clearing. Albert watched in fascination as they prepared for the ceremony, erecting living structures from rapidly growing plants that formed archways and platforms adorned with bioluminescent flowers. Elder Terax presided over the gathering, his elaborate crystalline crown catching the light of the setting suns. The ceremony began with a retelling of Aaron's illness and recovery, with different Velor taking turns to add musical elements that transformed the narrative into something between a story and a symphony. When it came time to recognize Albert's contribution, he was presented with a small crystal that hummed with a frequency matching the rhythm of the forest. Voice stone, Cyriel explained quietly, will help you hear forest songs, understand Velor speech better. The stone felt warm in his palm, almost alive. When he closed his fingers around it, Albert experienced a momentary connection to the surrounding environment, as if he could sense the living energy flowing through the plants and crystalline formations. "Thank you," he said to Elder Terax, attempting the Valorian gesture of respect that Cyril had taught him. "I am honored to learn from your people." The elder responded with a series of melodic tones that the translator rendered as, "Knowledge shared grows stronger. Velor and human, different branches, same forest." As the formal portion of the ceremony concluded, the gathering transitioned into a celebration. Glowing fruits and beverages were shared. Music emanated from instruments grown from living plants, and the Velor's bioluminescent patterns synchronized in complex, beautiful displays. Albert found himself seated between Cyril and Aaron, watching the festivities with a sense of belonging he hadn't anticipated. Aaron leaned against him comfortably, pointing out different Velor and explaining their roles in the community. "That one grows dwellings," she said, indicating a tall Velor with an asymmetrical crown. "That one speaks to water, makes it clean and sweet." Her small hand gestured broadly. "All have purpose. What is human Albert's purpose here?" The question, innocent but profound, gave Albert pause. "I'm still discovering that," he admitted. "But I think part of it is building bridges, connections between your people and mine, sharing knowledge that helps both." Aaron considered this seriously. "Good purpose," she decided. "Like roots connecting trees underground, not seen, but important." Cyril, who had been listening to their exchange, added, "Some purposes find us, others we choose." Her silver eyes met Albert's with quiet intensity. "Best purposes, we choose together." As night fell fully, the bioluminescence of both the Velor and the surrounding forest created a spectacle of light that rivaled the star-filled sky above. Albert found himself thinking of the sterile research stations and crowded guild facilities that had been his only homes for years. They seemed pale and lifeless compared to this vibrant community, integrated so perfectly with its environment. Later, as the celebration wound down, Albert stood with Cyril at the edge of the settlement, looking out over the glowing forest. Aaron had fallen asleep among a group of Velor children, all piled together like puppies in a nest of soft, luminous moss. "I need to contact the guild," Albert said, breaking the comfortable silence between them. "Report my findings. Explain about the Velor." Cyril's crown vibrated thoughtfully. "What will guild do with knowledge of our existence?" "Protocols require establishing formal diplomatic relations," Albert explained. "But I'll recommend a cautious approach, limited contact, protection of Velor sovereignty and knowledge rights." "And if guild disagrees? If they see only valuable plants, useful medicines?" It was a valid concern, given the history Cyril had shared. Albert thought carefully before answering. "Then I would stand with the Velor," he said simply. "Some loyalties run deeper than organizational affiliations." Cyril's bioluminescent patterns flowed in what he recognized as a pattern of deep emotion. "Spoken like true Velor," she said softly. "Perhaps human Albert has found more than research subject here." "Much more," he agreed, tentatively reaching for her hand. Their fingers intertwined, 6 and 5, finding a configuration that worked despite the difference. The twin moons of Exelon rose over the forest, casting silver light across the crystalline formations. In the distance, Aaron slept peacefully, fully recovered and dreaming whatever dreams young Velor dreamed. And beside him, Cyril's bioluminescence pulsed in rhythm with the forest around them, a visual representation of the harmony Albert had unexpectedly found on this remote world. "Tomorrow," Cyril said, "I show you secret caves where oldest plants grow. Begin new medicine project together." "I'd like that," Albert replied, feeling the voice stone warm against his chest, where he wore it on a simple cord. It hummed in tune with the forest's rhythm, as if welcoming him home. Home. The concept had been abstract for so long. A series of temporary assignments, research vessels, and sterile quarters. But here, among the living architecture of the Velour settlement, with Cyriel's hand in his and Aaron's future to consider, the word suddenly had tangible meaning. As the first light of dawn broke over the horizon, painting the bioluminescent forest in hues of gold and amber, Albert and Cyriel stood together on the threshold of his newly grown dwelling. It was a structure that combined elements of both cultures, the organic, flowing lines of Valorian architecture, with practical adaptations for human physiology. Erin danced ahead of them, her small form weaving between crystalline formations with the boundless energy of youth restored. Her recovery was complete, her mind lights strong and vibrant, visible as patterns of light beneath her violet skin. "New day," Cyriel said, her silver eyes reflecting the sunrise. "New journey begins." Albert nodded, feeling the weight of the voice stone against his chest, its gentle hum synchronizing with the rhythm of his heart. "Together," he agreed, and they stepped across the threshold into a future neither could have imagined when a desperate plea in a forest had brought their worlds together.